The night mom shouted, "Pack your things." My heart pounded so loud I thought the walls could hear it. She thought throwing me out meant she had finally won. But what she didn't know was that her words lit the fire I had been holding back for years. By the time she realized what I had done, when the autopay stopped and the bills came crashing down, it was already too late. In the dining room, everyone sat around the table like it was supposed to be a happy evening. Kona kept her head down, trying not to speak, because she already knew how things always went. Her parents smiled proudly at Zeker, praising him for every little thing he did, telling him how smart and successful he was. Every word felt like a knife in her chest, but she stayed silent, hoping to just get through the meal without breaking. Her daughter sat quietly beside her, eating slowly, and Kona thought about the school fee letter that had been weighing heavy in her bag. She finally gathered courage and spoke, her voice soft but steady. "Mama, Papa, I need some help with Naya's school fees. It is getting hard for me alone." For a moment, the whole table went quiet, and Kona thought maybe they would listen, maybe this time would be different. But then her mother's face hardened. She put down her spoon and looked straight at Kona, her voice sharp and full of anger. "Help? Again? If you can't survive on your own, then you don't belong here." The words hit harder than any slap. The air in the room turned heavy, and Zeker smirked slightly, as if enjoying her pain. Kona's little girl lowered her eyes, holding tightly onto her mother's hand under the table, confused and scared by the harshness of her grandmother's words. Kona wanted to defend herself, to scream that she had been working day and night just to keep her child safe, while Zeker never lifted a finger without being praised. But her throat closed up, and the tears burned behind her eyes. She realized nothing she said would change the way they saw her. To them, she would always be the failure, the burden, the one they wished wasn't there. That dinner, which was supposed to be about family, became the moment that broke her inside. She sat in silence, pushing her food around the plate, while her mother and father went back to laughing with Zeker as if nothing had happened. But inside Kona's heart, something had changed forever. She knew she could not keep begging for love that would never be given. That night, her pain turned into a decision she could never turn back from. Kona's hands froze on the table when her mother suddenly pushed back her chair. The room went cold as her mother's voice filled every corner. "Pack your things. Leave tonight." It was not whispered in anger. It was shouted so everyone would hear, so there would be no mistake. For a moment, even Zeker looked stunned, his spoon hanging in the air. The neighbors outside could have heard it, and that was exactly what her mother wanted. To shame her, to make her feel small in front of the very people who were supposed to be her family. Kona's little girl, Naya, tightened her grip on her mother's hand until her tiny fingers almost hurt. The child's eyes were wide with fear, her lips trembling, as if she could not believe that her grandmother had just ordered them out like strangers. Kona pulled her daughter closer, her own heart breaking into pieces, but she kept her face steady. She had grown used to her mother's harsh words, but this was different. This was final. This was rejection in its loudest form. Her father sat frozen in his chair, staring at the table as if the wood pattern suddenly became more interesting than his own daughter's life. He did not raise his voice, he did not say a word. His silence was louder than her mother's shouting. It told Kona everything. No one was coming to defend her. She and her child were alone in that moment. The laughter from earlier, the talk about Zeker's future and his greatness, disappeared into heavy silence. Kona's chest tightened. She wanted to cry, to plead, but instead she swallowed the pain and nodded slowly. If they wanted her gone, then she would go. She would not give them the satisfaction of seeing her beg. Inside, though, her world was shaking. She thought of all the years she had cooked in that kitchen, cleaned that house, worked late hours only to still send money home. None of it mattered. In a single sentence, her mother had erased her place in the family. As she held Naya close, Kona knew this was the moment her life split into two. The part where she tried to belong, and the part where she finally stopped trying. Her mother thought she had won by throwing her out. But deep inside, Kona felt something new rise, something that whispered, "This is not the end. This is the beginning." Kona moved slowly through her small room, folding the few clothes she had into a worn-out bag. Each piece of fabric felt heavier than it should, not because of weight, but because of what it meant. She was leaving behind the house she once called home. Naya sat quietly on the bed, hugging her school bag like it was the only safe thing she had left. Kona wanted to comfort her, but her hands were shaking too much. As she stepped into the hallway with her bag, she saw her father standing near the doorframe. He wasn't speaking, just watching her with tired eyes that seemed older than his face. For a brief second, their eyes locked, and Kona thought she saw something there: regret, sorrow, maybe even guilt. His lips parted as if he wanted to say something, but no words came out. His silence filled the air between them, heavy and sharp, and it broke her heart even more than her mother's shouting. Kona waited, hoping, praying that maybe he would stop her, that maybe he would finally stand up for her after all these years. But he looked away, his hands trembling slightly, and chose to say nothing. That silence told her the truth. He was never going to fight for her, never going to protect her, not even now. The father she once adored had become just another shadow in her mother's storm. Naya tugged at her sleeve, whispering, "Mama, are we really leaving?" Kona nodded gently and forced a small smile, though her eyes were burning with unshed tears. She carried her bag to the door, her back straight, her step steady, determined not to let them see her fall apart. Before stepping out, she turned one last time to look at her father. He stood frozen, his face pale, his silence louder than any word he could have spoken. That moment carved something deep inside her. If they wanted her gone, then she would go. But she would never forget the way he chose silence over love. As the door closed behind her, Kona's heart hardened. The pain she carried turned into something else: resolve. If they thought pushing her out would break her, they were wrong. She would rise, and when she did, they would feel the weight of what they had lost. Kona sat on the edge of her new bed, a borrowed mattress in a neighbor's small room. Naya slept peacefully beside her, clutching a soft toy someone had kindly given. For the first time in days, the house was quiet, but Kona's mind refused to rest. Her mother's words echoed over and over, each one cutting deeper. "Pack your things. Leave tonight." They had thrown her out as if she was nothing. And yet, she remembered something they had forgotten, something powerful. Years ago, when Kona worked long shifts to support both herself and her daughter, her parents insisted she handle all their bills because she was good with money. They gave her no choice. The electricity, the mortgage, the water, even their little luxuries like TV subscriptions, all were linked to her bank account. Month after month, the money left her account, leaving her with barely enough for herself and Naya. She had carried that weight silently, believing it was her duty as their daughter. Now, as she sat in the dim light of her phone screen, she realized they had unknowingly handed her the key to their comfort. Her fingers trembled as she scrolled through each payment. She hovered over the cancel button, her heart racing. A small voice inside her asked, "Should I really do this?" But then she remembered Naya's scared little face at the dinner table, her mother's cold command, her father's silence. That was the answer. One by one she canceled them. Electricity gone. Water gone. Mortgage gone. Every bill that drained her strength was now cut off. With each click, she felt a strange mix of fear and relief. Fear, because she knew the storm that would follow. Relief, because for once she was not bending to their control. When the last autopay was canceled, Kona placed the phone down and let out a shaky breath. "If they don't want me, then they don't get my help," she whispered to herself, her voice calm but steady. It wasn't anger driving her. It was clarity. They had made their choice when they threw her out. Now she was making hers. As she lay down beside her daughter, she felt lighter than she had in years. They thought pushing her away would leave her powerless. But what they didn't realize was that by discarding her, they had cut themselves off from the very lifeline that held their world together. And soon they would feel it. The first 2 days passed quietly for Kona in her neighbor's small home. She spent her time helping with chores, cooking simple meals, and walking Naya to school. Life was not easy, but there was peace. She no longer felt the sharp sting of her mother's words every hour. For the first time in years she could breathe. But while her world was slowly settling, the house she left behind was beginning to crack. It started with the lights. One evening, her parents were sitting in the living room, and suddenly everything went dark. At first they thought it was a minor outage, but when hours passed, and the whole street remained lit except their house, panic set in. Her mother grumbled and snapped at her father, demanding answers. They searched for receipts, but none could be found. By the next morning, the water taps ran dry. Buckets stood empty in the kitchen, and the laundry piled high. Zeker shouted angrily, accusing his father of being careless. How can you let this happen? Do you know who I am? People will laugh at us. His voice echoed through the walls as though his anger could change reality. But nothing did. The bills had not been paid, and services were shutting down one by one. Late fees came next. Letters arrived in the mail, marked in red, demanding payment for the mortgage and other accounts. Each envelope was like a stone added to their already sinking ship. Neighbors began to whisper. People who once admired the family for their pride and wealth now exchanged knowing looks, murmuring that something was wrong in the house. Inside, the pressure boiled. Zeker slammed doors, shouting that he was not the one to blame. He refused to take responsibility, throwing insults at his father and pacing the house like a caged animal. His mother, consumed by fury, grabbed her phone. She dialed Kona's number with shaking hands, her voice ready to explode the moment her daughter picked up. But when the call connected, there was nothing. Kona's phone rang and rang, then fell silent. No answer. No voice. Only emptiness. Her mother tried again, louder this time, pacing the living room with rage. Still, Kona did not pick up. She knew exactly who was calling, and she had already decided. Silence was her reply. The proud home that once laughed at Kona's struggles was now falling apart, piece by piece. And as they sat in darkness, thirsty and humiliated, the truth finally began to show. The daughter they threw away had been the one holding everything together. By the end of the week, the family's downfall was no longer a secret. Neighbors noticed the house that once glowed every night now sat in darkness. The sound of a generator, which other homes used, was never heard there. Buckets of water were carried in from far places because the taps had long gone dry. It didn't take long for whispers to spread through the streets. People who once admired the family for their wealth now laughed quietly behind their backs. At the market, women talked in low voices. Have you heard? Their lights are gone. They can't even pay for water. Men shook their heads, remembering how proud the mother always acted, how she boasted about her golden son Zeker. Now, they said with pity and mockery, the family was crumbling. Children even teased as they walked past the house, pointing at the overgrown yard and saying, "The mighty have fallen." For Zeker, the shame burned deeper than anything he had ever known. He had grown up praised and admired, treated as the one who could do no wrong. But now, everywhere he went, people stared. They no longer clapped for him. They whispered instead. When he walked into the barber's shop, one man joked, "Better cut his hair quickly before the lights go off again." The laughter that followed cut him like a knife. Unable to bear it, Zeker began lashing out in public. At the marketplace, he shouted at a seller for giving him the wrong change, slamming the coins to the ground. At church, when someone asked politely about their situation, he barked back angrily, claiming it was none of their business. His rage grew each day, but instead of gaining respect, it only brought more shame. The community had already made their judgment. The family was reaping what they had sown. Meanwhile, his mother held her head high in public, pretending nothing was wrong. She walked with stiff shoulders, but even she could hear the whispers behind her. Her once loud voice grew quieter as neighbors no longer looked at her with admiration but with hidden smiles, waiting for her to pass so they could laugh again. The father, silent as always, avoided gatherings completely. He stayed home, ashamed to show his face. For years, they had lived as if nothing could touch them, as if their pride was unshakable. But now, with each passing day, their shame grew heavier. And though they refused to say it out loud, deep inside they all knew the bitter truth. The collapse began the moment they chose to throw Kona away. While her family struggled in darkness, Kona was quietly building a new life. She woke up early each morning, preparing Naya for school before heading off to work. She asked for extra shifts, taking every chance she could to earn a little more money. The days were long and tiring, but there was no one to insult her, no one to remind her of her failures. Each hour of work became a step toward freedom. With the money she saved, she found a small apartment. It wasn't big, and the walls were plain, but the moment she stepped inside with Naya, it felt different from the house she had left behind. It was warm, it was peaceful, and it was theirs. She placed a second-hand rug on the floor, hung Naya's drawings on the wall, and bought 2 soft pillows that made their little beds feel like heaven. For the first time in years, Kona smiled while arranging her own home. knowing every piece belonged to her, not to anyone else. At night, she watched Naya sleeping soundly. No more nights of the little girl hearing cruel words at the dinner table. No more tears hidden under blankets. Naya's breathing was calm, her small face relaxed, and that alone gave Kona strength to keep going. Seeing her daughter finally at peace reminded her that all the pain she had endured was worth it. Kona herself began to feel lighter. The weight of her parents' expectations, their constant criticism, their endless comparisons to Zeker, all of it was gone. She was no longer trapped under their control. In her little apartment, even with nothing fancy, she felt richer than she had ever felt in her parents' house. On weekends, she and Naya cooked together, laughed together, and sometimes just sat by the window, watching the world outside. Slowly, life no longer felt like survival, it felt like living. She could finally breathe without fear of judgment. She didn't tell anyone about her progress. She didn't need to. While her family's name sank lower each day in the community, Kona quietly rose higher. Her silence was her shield, and her success was her answer. The very daughter they had underestimated, the one they thought was weak, was the one proving to be the strongest of them all. And though they didn't know it yet, Kona had already built something far more valuable than pride or wealth. She had built freedom. It was late in the evening when Kona heard a knock on her door. She opened it carefully and there they were, her parents, standing outside with tired faces. The weight of unpaid bills and endless late fees had followed them all the way to her doorstep. Her mother's eyes burned with anger, but her father looked smaller, weaker, as if he had aged years in just a few weeks. Before Kona could even speak, her mother pushed forward. "Turn it back on," she demanded sharply. "The electricity, the water, the mortgage, you owe us. Fix it now." Her voice carried the same authority it always had, as though she still believed Kona was the frightened girl who would obey without question. Naya, hearing the voices, walked to her mother's side and held her hand tightly. Kona squeezed her daughter's fingers gently, drawing strength from the little girl's presence. She looked straight at her mother, not with fear but with calm. Her silence stretched for a moment, and it unsettled them more than any loud reply could have. Finally Kona spoke, her tone steady and clear. "No. I don't owe you anything. You told me to leave, and I left. You made it clear I don't belong in your house, and now I don't belong in your problems." Her mother's face turned red, her mouth opening and closing as if words were failing her. She had expected shouting, tears maybe, even begging. But this quiet strength was something she had never seen in her daughter before. Her father shifted uncomfortably, lowering his gaze to the ground. For the first time he seemed ashamed, not of Kona, but of himself. He whispered her name softly, as though trying to reach her, but even he knew his silence all those years had cost too much. Her mother stepped closer, pointing a finger. "We raised you. We gave you everything, and this is how you repay us." Kona didn't flinch. "You didn't raise me, Mama. You broke me. And still, I tried to carry you. But not anymore. My life belongs to me and to my daughter." The words hit harder than any scream. The quiet truth in them made both parents freeze. Behind her, the little apartment glowed warmly, a symbol of the home Kona had built on her own. In that moment, they saw clearly that their control over her was gone. Kona stood tall at the doorway, holding her child's hand, unmoved by threats or guilt. Her calm refusal shook them more deeply than anger ever could, and they knew the power they once had over her was gone forever. For years, Kona's father had stayed in the shadows, speaking little, obeying much, and allowing his wife's voice to rule the house. But that night at the gate, with his daughter standing tall and his wife shouting angrily, something inside him finally cracked. He looked at Kona, her calm eyes so different from the broken child she once was, and he felt the full weight of his silence pressing on his chest. His wife was still demanding, her finger raised, her voice sharp as ever, but he could no longer bear it. Slowly he lifted his head and spoke. His voice was low at first, shaky from years of being unused, but it carried truth that could not be ignored. "She is right," he said, surprising everyone. His wife spun around in shock, and even Kona froze for a moment. "We were wrong. We should never have cast her out. We should never have treated her as less." The words spilled out like a confession long buried. He admitted that fear had chained him, fear of his wife's anger, fear of losing control in his own house. "I let that fear destroy us," he whispered. And now we are paying for it. His shoulders sagged as though a heavy burden had finally been named, but his eyes were clearer than they had been in years. His wife's face twisted, furious at his betrayal. How dare you take her side? After all we did for her. But her husband stood firm for the first time, his voice stronger now. What did we do for her? We broke her spirit, we used her, and when she asked for help, we threw her away. That was not love. That was cruelty. The truth hung heavy in the air. Kona said nothing, simply holding Naya's hand tighter. But the silence from her side was no longer weakness. It was strength. Zeker, standing a few steps behind, shifted uncomfortably. For the first time, he saw his father looking at Kona with respect instead of indifference. The golden child's crown slipped that night. His father's words showed him plainly. The family no longer revolved around him. The illusion of his importance was shattered. In that single breaking point, the house of lies his mother had built began to fall apart. And though Kona did not smile, inside she knew the truth. Her father's voice, though late, had finally broken free, and nothing would ever be the same again. Kona stood in the cool night air, her daughter's small hand tucked safely in hers. The house behind her was quiet, but heavy with the weight of broken pride and shattered control. For years, that place had been a cage, but tonight, she walked away with no chains on her heart. She didn't yell. She didn't curse. She didn't beg. Instead, she gave them the one thing they never thought she could: silence. Her absence was the final gift, sharper than any revenge. Her daughter looked up at her, eyes searching, and Kona bent down, whispering softly, "Sometimes the only way to win is to stop playing their game." Those words weren't just for her child, but for herself, a reminder that peace was more powerful than any fight. Inside, her mother's voice cracked for the first time, no longer filled with commands but with fear of losing control. Her father sat with his head bowed, finally seeing what his silence had cost. And Zeker, the once favored son, realized the crown he wore in that house meant nothing now. The family that had cast Kona aside was falling apart, not because she destroyed them, but because without someone to control, they had nothing left to hold on to. But Kona didn't turn back. She walked forward, step by step, with her daughter by her side. For the first time in years, her path was her own. No dates, no demands, no begging for a place at their table. She was free, and freedom was worth more than anything they could ever take from her. Behind her, the walls of pride crumbled. Ahead of her, the road opened wide. And though it wasn't paved with riches, it was filled with something far greater: dignity, strength, and peace. Kona rose higher not because she fought them, but because she chose to rise above them. And in that choice, she gave her daughter a gift no money could buy: the example of a woman who refused to be broken, who walked away with her head high, and who built her own story when the old one tried to bury her. That was the ending they never expected. Kona strong, smiling, and unshaken, while the family that once threw her out was left in the ruins of their own making.